So somehow we're now in October and final year 12 ATAR exams are just around the corner. And if you don't know how and what you should be studying leading up to those final exams, you're kind of screwed. Unless you had a video that could help you out, which is what I'm going to be doing today. Now, preferably you've been actively studying the content across all your subjects. But if you haven't really been doing this throughout the year, then what the hell do you do leading up to your very first final year 12 exam? You're probably sitting at your desk, staring at your laptop and textbook notes, trying to get through as many past paper questions as you possibly can. Now, I spoke to a few of our KIS tutors to see what they exactly did just before exam season. So not what they did during the year, because that is completely irrelevant now, but what they did 2 to 3 weeks leading up to those final year 12 exams. And from those conversations, there were 3 things that stood out to me. If you know exactly what to study, in what order, and how to actually move through it without burning out between now and your final exam, I think you'll feel a lot better walking into that exam hall. Remember, they count for 50% of your final ATAR rank. So you want to be putting as much effort as you can now to make sure you can maximize that 50%. And hopefully this video does that. So let's get into it. So by far the biggest mistake we see students make leading up to these final exams is not having a proper plan in place and kind of studying whatever they feel like feels right. And then when exam day hits, they realize they never actually covered the topics they were weaker at and they go into panic mode. So here's what you should do right now. You should take your exam timetable and grab your syllabus for every single subject that you do. Now, I know some of you might see this as a waste of time. Boring! Because this isn't studying necessarily, but trust me, this is the only time you'll need to look at them, so stick with me. Now, for each of your subjects, go through every single syllabus dot point and you're going to color code them based on the following criteria. Red meaning you're not confident at all, yellow meaning somewhat confident, and green being very confident. This will take you roughly about 20 minutes per subject. I think the more honest you are with yourself, the faster you'll get through this. But trust me, it will completely change how you study between now and your final year 12 exam. Because instead of doing whatever feels right to you and guessing your study plan, you now know exactly where your weak spots are and which ones to prioritize first. So start with red, move to yellow, and finish off with green. In the next section, we'll go over how you can use your exam timetable and the color coding system to make sure that you're not only prioritizing the subjects where you might have a lot of weak topics, but also making sure that you're covering the subjects that are taking place sooner. You've got to remember that you unfortunately don't have the time to study everything perfectly, but you do have plenty of time to patch your weakest areas, and those weakest areas should be prioritized first. So now that you've mapped out all your weak topics, you might fall into the following trap, which is looking at your exam timetable, seeing that you have, 2 English papers first up, and then thinking you're going to be doing English study throughout the entire day and going to be doing it for the next few days because it's the first exam, right? In doing that, you find that you don't actually make much progress for that specific subject because you get fatigued, but you also don't leave enough time to cover all the other subjects in your exam timetable. Something I noticed when studying in high school and university was that after 2 hours of deep focused work, I think your focus actually starts to crater. So you're likely not learning anything after a certain point and you're kind of just performing the appearance of study. So here's what you actually should do instead. I think you should study multiple subjects in one day. So let's say you have English up first, which should usually be the case, and then you have a chemistry exam a few days later. So leading up to those exams, you wouldn't spend all your time preparing for English. You would rather do, 2 hours of English in the morning, then switch to chemistry in the afternoon, and then maybe when you have some time in the evening to go back to studying English. The reason switching between different subjects works is because it forces your brain to re-engage itself. It's like a mental reset for the brain. And you end up staying sharper, you absorb a lot more content, and you actually get more productive work done. Now, to make sure that you can organize this so you don't lose your mind, you can use the color coding system that we talked about in the previous point. So for an example, if English has a few red topics and your exam is 2 weeks, you need to cover those topics and get clarity on them across the 2 weeks whilst leaving ample time for practice questions. So if you can do that, you can then layer in one yellow or red topic from another subject each day to keep things moving. So the main takeaway point here is to not just focus your daily studying on one given subject, but to rather spread it across 2 to 3 different subjects. And you can base it off your exam timetable depending on what exams come sooner than others. So my last piece of advice is ironically a piece of advice you've probably heard millions of times, which is doing as many practice questions as you possibly can. Now, whilst I think practice questions are absolutely crucial, something that is overlooked about them is that if you don't know the content as well as you should, doing practice papers is just going to highlight what you don't know without actually fixing it. And so there's a rule I think you can follow when it comes to doing practice questions, which is if you're confident with the content, do as many practice questions as you can. And if you're not, I think it's important that you go back and rebuild those foundations first. So if you have a lot of yellow and red topics, those need to be covered first before you attempt practice questions. You know, maybe watch a recap video or go through some worked examples before then attempting an actual practice question. Now, something interesting that all the KIS tutors I spoke with mentioned was that they all kept a mistakes logbook throughout the year for each of their subjects. So every time they got a question wrong, they wrote it down in this mistake logbook. So the question type, what they got wrong, and the correct solution with a breakdown of why that solution was correct. And so by the time these final year 12 exams rolled around, which is where we are today, they had a personalized list of every type of question they uniquely struggled with. So as you do practice papers over the next few weeks, I would recommend keeping a running list of the mistakes that you keep making and reviewing them a few days before each of your exams. Getting on top of all the topics that you're weaker on and all the mistakes you've made in the past will allow you to be a lot more confident walking into that exam hall. So if there's anything to take away from this video, it's that you're not going to be able to cram 4 terms of content perfectly in just a few weeks, but you can be very strategic about it. You can identify your weak spots, you can rotate through subjects to keep your brain sharp, and you can use practice papers in the right way. I think students who end up doing really well in their final year 12 exams are those who studied the right things in the right order without burning themselves out leading up to those exams. So here's what you can actually do right after clicking off this video. Color code your topics for each of your subjects from red, yellow, and green, and then pick your weakest topic and study it for 90 minutes and then switch to another subject for an hour. If you can do that, I think you've definitely got a good chance of maximizing your ATAR results. Now, if you want more specific details, I'll link some relevant blog articles where we go into weekly review strategies and show you how to avoid burnout. And if you haven't checked out our previous video on the KIS 3-step framework for year 12 English success, I'd highly recommend going and checking it out. It might just save you for your very first exam. Now stop watching YouTube and get to studying, and I'll catch you in the next one.